Welcome to Khealos' Gaming Table. I am Khealos. On this channel I talk about tabletop RPGs, miniature war games, and rambling walks about whatever comes to mind. I've talked about a bunch of different sci-fi franchises, Halloween, Battletech, Alpha Strike, talked about 3D printing yesterday, and we're gonna swing it back to Battletech here in a minute, but it is Thursday. We've got one more day of work, and then I get to fly home. I'm out of the office a little bit early because I've got to go back in tonight for to do the repair work that I didn't get a chance to do a couple weeks ago. I have the tools now. Everyone should be available, so fingers crossed. I'll be able to get in there, get it done, go back, sleep, work tomorrow, fly home Saturday. It's been an interesting trip. It's been fun. It's had some ups, it's had some downs, but I'm ready to have some ups and downs back at the house if I can. Preferably more ups than downs. That's what I'm shooting for. All right. So, Battletech for me is a lot of fun, and one of the better parts of it is building your force, and that comes down to picking mechs for jobs based upon, well, the amount of point value that's going to be available, and if you happen to know the scenario, knowing the era, that kind of thing, that all helps. But not including the super heavies, there are 4 classes of mechs. You've got your light mechs running from 20 to 35 tons. You've got your mediums, running from 40 to 55 tons. Your heavies, 60 to 75 tons. And then your assaults, 80 to 100 tons. And within these various weight brackets, there are hundreds of different mechs, different shapes, sizes, different manufacturers, different utilities. And everyone has their own preferred weight class that they have the most fun with. And, not to be a jack of all trades, everyone also seems to have their own favorite mech, whether it's speed, armor, weapons loadout, a mix of all of the above. And I thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about, some of my favorites. And as I've said, I am a bifactional player, so I do play both, Intersphere and clans. So I'll try and include, some from each. Give a little bit of stats on them. I'm not the walking encyclopedia or, the living sarna that some people are, so I will probably get some details wrong. I don't have the sheets in front of me. I'm talking on my phone, so it's not, I can look it up. And these walks aren't designed to provide, 100% accurate information. This is just me talking, getting used to talking to the camera, and hopefully being somewhat entertaining. I'm curious to, if my channel ever does take off and people, go back and watch the ongoing series, because, well, I don't plan to do it every day, just because I do have, things that I have to do back in Austin, but I wouldn't mind getting out, once a week, twice a week, possibly going for a walk, doing some rambling talks, especially, if people give me some topics to talk about so that I can kind of remain focused. But if you followed along this far, that's a tall order. But all right, well, to kick things off for in light class, and it's probably stereotypical, but I think my favorite light mech is probably going to be the Jenner. And that's a fast mech. It's got okay-ish armor. At least, I forget the model, but it's got 4 medium lasers and I think 2 SRM2s. But, this is a solid mech that can race around, build up some speed, get a nice TMM, depending upon the situation, get around, flank somebody, light them up from behind. If it's already damaged, it's got some, potential crit seeking with the SRMs. If you don't want, to risk a potential ammo explosion, You know, there's the model that I think gives it drops the SRMs and gives it some more heat sinks, you know, to handle those 4 medium lasers. But yeah, I've seen a Jenner race around the board and absolutely just, I won't say pound, but drive the opponent insane trying to, you know, follow it around, because it just races around. If it gets in a bad position or whatever, it can, depending upon the terrain, it can get behind the, you know, something to prevent being shot. And then if the Jenner player wins initiative, you know, they're able to better maneuver to get back out to, you know, the target. But it can be an infuriating mech. You know, once you start getting some hits on it, you know, chances are it's going to go down. But getting those hits on it's a little more difficult. On the clan side, I think, you know, one of my favorite light mechs is probably going to be the Adder, or the Puma. It's a solid mech. It's got that giant hood, but I think I like the Prime version that has the 2 ER PPCs, because, you know, who wants to to deal with a light mech that can reach out and touch them and do, you know, 15 points per PPC, you know, you're talking 30 points, and do it at long range. You know, much like other light mechs, it is not going to be able to take quite the punishment of, you know, a larger mech, but, you know, light mechs typically are not designed for brawling or frontline assaults. They're fast, they're fragile, you know, put a BAP on it, some ECM, something to run around, you know, have it tag, you know, if you've got a light with tag, use it to, you know, give you some, give your missile launch, your missile boats, you know, a little bonus, you know, when they're going to shoot. But, you know, the Adder is a solid mech, like most clan Omnis are. You know, debuting 3050, at least to the inner sphere. It can be a very devastating mech and punch well above its weight class. Moving into the mediums is actually where I prefer to play, because you have that mixture of some of them being very fast or faster, having a little bit more armor, but being able to slug it out and you know, duke a bit harder than you can with the with your lights. But here, the Hunchback is almost certainly my favorite, specifically the 4P. I fell in love with the Disco Back the first time I really started using it, and you know, what can you say? A medium mech with 8 medium lasers. You know, 6 in I think it's the right shoulder, you know, as opposed to that AC-20. Sure, that AC-20 is exceptionally scary, but you know, it's a one hit, and you know, you roll the hit, and if you miss, that's it. You know, with the Disco Back, you got 8 possible chances to hit, and if you hit, you know, half or more, you're doing the same amount as the AC-20. And if you hit with all 8, you're still looking at, you know, 40 points of damage. That's going to trigger a PSR. Sure, you're going to get a little toasty, but you're not going to run out of ammo for your lasers. And, you know, if you get, you know, there's no ammo bin for that AC-20 I'm going to go up with. I personally do prefer energy weapon mechs over ammo ones. But, you know, to be fair, there's something to be said for firing that AC-20 and rolling boxcars and, you know, completely decapitating the enemy mech. Sure, the Hunchback isn't very fast. It's got, you know, a decent amount of armor on the front and the sides. You just don't want anything to get behind it, because, you know, that's where things start to go bad. You know, unfortunately, it's not very fast, so you'll probably want to move it, you know, near last in the initiative order. Otherwise, you know, somebody's light or another medium's going to sneak up behind it and, you know, blast it in the butt. But, you know, at the same time, you know, you have to be careful with it, because, you know, 8 medium lasers is just, you know, nasty. On the clan side, the Grendel is probably my favorite medium mech. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like the Stormcrow. It's a solid mech. But visually speaking, I really love the redesign that they did for the clan invasion on the Grendel. It's a solid, fast mech. It's got good armament, so that, you know, it can reach out with that ER laser, ER large, and then, you know, when it closes, you know, start really stripping armor away with some of the mediums. It's fast. I think it's got jump jets, so it can really position itself to be a threat on the battlefield, and a threat that, you know, the enemy really can't ignore, or ignore at your peril. You know, like most clan things, it does have an XL engine, but it's got a clan XL engine, so even if you take out a side torso, it's still going to be able to potentially limp off the battlefield, as opposed to an inner sphere XL engine that once you take out a side torso, that's it. The mech is done. For heavies is also a fun range, because you're not quite into the assault category, but you've got some heavier weapons, more armor, and they can stick around and duke it out a bit longer. Probably the Thunderbolt, the Thud, for the Inner Sphere is mine. You know, same kind of thing. It is a solid mech. It's got LRM launcher. It's got a large laser, some machine guns, and a couple of other things, but it is relatively mobile, especially if you get the 5SE that's got jump jets. It's got some range, and, you know, once you get into striking distance, you can get in and actually do some serious damage as well. And it's a great looking mech. It's one of my favorite redesigns. I mean, I loved the Dugrim. Was it Dugrim? No, it was Crush. Whichever anime it was from, I liked the visual for it, but the old Ralpartha model that was all blocky and the arms stood out and it had, you know, like a giant cannon on one arm, and it just looked kind of derpy. That was never my thing. I mean, it's a good mech, but, you know, that particular model just... But the new CGL one, and especially the, I think it's the Iridani Light Horse pack that I think is now being sold everywhere, but was a Barnes & Noble exclusive. It's the one that's got the jump jet plumes on it. I've not been a big fan of the jump jet plumes on any of the those exclusive packs, but putting it on the base, you know, the way that it's positioned, it looks like it's, you know, sprinting forward. It's a very action-oriented pose, and I can really appreciate that. You know, on the clan side, you know, I'm sure some people are going to say, oh, let me guess, Mad Cat, Timberwolf. No. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Timberwolf is an amazing Omni-Mech, and there's a reason that it's the poster child for the franchise. I especially love the redesigned version of it, because, you know, like the old metal ones and the Timberwolf that came in the City Tech box set was a little spindly, and it wasn't very well posed, because I think, like, looked like it was kind of like at a parade rest, just standing there with his arms hanging down at the sides. Not a lot of fun. And not a good pose, at least for me. But it's not the Timberwolf. I actually like the Summoner. I find the Summoner to be a good mix of armor, weapons, and mobility, especially since it does have some jump jets on it. And, you know, the Summoner, like any Omni-Mech, you know, you have a bunch of different configurations that you can just swap out the weapons pods on, and it can be a very flexible Omni-Mech on the battlefield. I like the look of it. I think it's great. And yeah, Summoner, when we did the circle of the trial of position the very first time, I picked the Summoner because it's a great mech, and I did pretty well. I at least got my kill. I became a mech warrior. I didn't get my head taken off like Voss did, but, you know, that's one of those stories that will probably never die, or at least I hope it doesn't. Because if you can't tell stories like that, you know, are you really having fun? And even if I had been the one that had his head taken off by the AC-20, I'd still be, you know, kind of giggling about it. But yeah. So for assault mechs, Assault mechs can be fun, but at the same time, they're just a giant slugfest. And you know, that again, that can be fun, but at some point it's just going to be like two heavyweight boxers duking it out, you know, looking for that one potential armor critical, getting a through armor critical, or getting that lucky hit with a cockpit hit, potentially knocking the opponent unconscious. And invariably, depending upon, you know, who's around, everyone's going to eventually gang up on that assault mech until, you know, it might outweigh everything, but eventually, you know, you're going to take it down. Or it's going to walk out of there, but probably with a massive repair bill, depending upon, you know, how well they do. For assault mechs, there's a bunch of different ones. I mean, and a lot of people like them, but for me, I'm going to have to go with the awesome, specifically the 8Q, you know, the classic. It's hard to improve upon that. You're talking 3 PPCs, almost maxed out armor, and, you know, enough heat sinks to, you know, fire consistently at least 2. And if you're able to stand still and not generate any heat, you can pop off 3 periodically. If you've got a decent gunner in there that can snipe, you're going to run somebody's day with those 3 PPCs. It's also heavy enough to, you know, do some damage if you get into brawling range, especially with, you know, that battle fist. Or, you know, if you're me, you kick them. You know, for the longest time I was like, yeah, physical attacks, you know, not so much. And then I started to see them, I won't say proliferate, but more people started doing them. And the first time, you know, that I kicked a mech and took his leg clean off, I'm like, all right, I'm sold. It's not an every game kind of thing, but, you know, if you can get in there and kick and force that PSR, doesn't matter how good that pilot is, there's always that chance that they're going to fail a PSR. And I mean, unless you're kicking somebody with a 2 or a 1 pilot skill. But if that's the case, you know, well, they've already screwed up if somebody's got that kind of skill and let somebody get, you know, that close. But, well, not really, actually. If I had that kind of skill, I absolutely would want somebody to get close enough for me to show off. But, you know, on the clan side, I'm not as versed with clan assault mechs, but probably the Warhawk. I mean, the Daiichi, it's big. You know, the Direwolf, it's big. It's got a bunch of stuff. Natasha Kerensky drove one, at least until she didn't. But yeah, it's not as fun for me. I definitely like the Warhawk more, especially in Alpha Strike, because it does have a bit more mobility. It's got the ability to really reach out and touch someone. Not to mention the fact that it has enough armor to take some punishment. You know, I think it's an outstanding mech, and it definitely follows that particular aesthetic. You know, you've got like the Puma at, you know, the light rings, then you've got the Adder, the Adder is the Puma, and then you got the Pouncer in the medium range with that same big hood. I'm trying to think of the heavy mech. If there's a heavy mech that falls into that category, that looks like it's, you know, got, you know, a big hood over it. And I'm sure I'll think of it after I've stopped recording. Please feel free to mention it if there is one, or what it is, in the comments below. And then, you know, both the Direwolf and the Warhawk, you know, have that big old hood. But it's a solid mech, and if you're driving one, you're going to probably wreck your opponent. But, you know, that's again, half the fun is actually, I like coming up with new and interesting combinations and testing them out, because, you know, each mech has its own style and its own role on the battlefield. You're not going to be charging into, okay, you shouldn't be charging headlong into a gun line with like your Locust or your Jenner or anything like that, because, you know, even if, you know, they're all gunnery 5, it's going to take you some time to get there, and all it's going to take is 1 or 2 lucky hits to cripple or potentially destroy you. But lights are a lot of fun because you are going to generate that giant TMM, well, potentially generate a good target modifier to make it harder to hit. Especially, you know, if there's a lot of open spaces, you know, you're going to eat up some of that movement by turning. But, you know, if you can get a good straightaway, you know, you're going to generate that target modifier and make it that much more difficult to hit. You know, most light mechs don't have that big of a punch. You know, the Panther, sure, it has PPC. You know, the Wolfhound has a large laser and some other things, but their lights are scouts. They're designed to gather intelligence, ping things depending upon what's out there, but not particularly designed to slug it out. You know, when Russell, you know, put his, I think it was the Stinger with a LRM-20, he jumped it out there basically jumped out into the middle of the battlefield, dropped trowel, and then everyone turned it into a pile of wreckage. You really can't do that with light mechs, especially when everyone starts focusing fire on it again. You know, luck is a massive component on the battlefield. You can run all the calculations, you can run all of the simulations, but like it or not, luck is a big factor on the battlefield, and it's the one thing you really can't plan for. Medium mechs, that's where I really like to play, like I said, because you have a bit of mobility. You can, typically you're going to have a bit more armor. You got jump jets oftentimes, so you can really hop around the battlefield, you know, get into trouble, get out of trouble depending upon, you know, how things go. But yeah, you've got a smattering of weapons, all the way, you know, from, you know, machine guns all the way up to some that actually have PPCs. So, you know, like the Cicada. You know, say what you will about it, you know, if you see a Cicada coming, you're probably going to want to deal with it, because you don't want a fast mech like that to potentially light you up with a PPC. You know, medium mechs, you start getting into a lot more, or heavy mechs, that's where you start getting into your brawlers. You know, the catapult, you know, the poor man's archer. Sure, it only has, I think, 8 volleys of fire, and it really doesn't have the heat sinks to dual fire both LRM launchers. But, you know, at least until those missile launchers run dry, you know, you've got a threat that can, you know, blast you at range with a bunch of LRMs. And then if you do get close, it's got the, you know, medium lasers to deal with those kind of threats. You know, the Archer is, you know, an iconic mech, and, you know, it's an LRM boat, and sure, you're gonna ruin somebody's day, especially if you got somebody tagging targets, or you're able to distract them and keep them at range so that they can't, you know, come in and ruin your fun. You know, and then you do have your big brawlers, you know, like the Black Knight. That's a pretty solid mech. It has piss poor heat management, so you got to be very careful with it. But, you know, if it comes in, it's going to come in swinging. And, you know, like a lot of mechs, it's going to have that armor advantage to do it. You know, the Timberwolf, one of the faces of the franchise, you don't want to ignore it, or at least not ignore it for very long, because it will become a problem. You know, all of the limitations that the Inner Sphere has with, you know, minimum distances for PPCs and LRMs, that doesn't exist for the clans, because they didn't destroy their manufacturing, industrial, and science base. They actually advanced upon the technology of the Star League and made it better. But, you know, you've got your long range hitters like the Archer and the Catapult. You also then have, you know, your guys that are designed more to get close in. You know, not all heavy mechs are created equal. You still have your Rifleman, which at range is not too bad, but it's got tissue paper for armor. And, you know, with autocannon rounds, you know, once that armor starts to vanish, especially wherever the ammo is stored, you're looking at the risk of going boom. The Hellbringer, another iconic clan Omni mech. I like the look of it. I like the idea of it. It just needs better armor, because any heavy mech that can't take an ERPPC to the torso, to either of its torsos, without running the risk of an ammo explosion or a critical, that's a problem. Because especially in a dueling society where you're going to have trials, all anyone's got to do is race in and wreck you. At the same time, they're going to have to take withering fire the entire time, but you get that hit with a Gauss rifle or a ERPPC, things are going to start going south for the Hellbringer. And assaults, they're just bricks. Sure, you've got outliers like the Charger, which can be very funny, one with like an AC-20 or a bunch of small pulse lasers to get in and really wreck shop. But Brian had a Charger, I think, in the last campaign and put it to very good use. And I think part of what he likes to do is he likes to take suboptimal mechs and make them wrecking balls. If you're going up against Brian, bring your A game, because he's going to put you through your paces and he's going to explain to you what he's going to do while he's doing it, and hopefully you'll pick up some tips and tricks. And that's something that you really should be doing. If you lose, why did you lose? You can't just blame your dice. There's going to be some tactics involved, whether it's you ignored a mech or you moved a mech last. The last game that I played, or one of the last games I played against Emery, he had my Battlemaster, I think it was my Battlemaster, dead to rights. Like no rear armor. He had managed to win initiative enough, maneuver might have been a Grendel, might have been something else. Clan Omni fast, but he had stripped away almost all of the rear armor on it, and instead of finishing off the Battlemaster, he pulled away to go flank something else. I think it was the Archer that I was fielding. Well, that gave my Battlemaster the ability to maneuver away to make it more difficult to get to his backside, and then just started to wail away at range. I think the Battlemaster eventually, it might have been the final mech on the battlefield, but yeah, if you've almost got somebody gone, they're almost destroyed, don't let something else do it. Finish them off, go on to the next target. That's my opinion. That game would have been totally different had he kept that whatever it was behind the Battlemaster, because I kept losing initiative and there was no way I was ever going to get away from that light mech, or that medium mech. I think it was a Shadow Cat, actually. But you live and you learn. But yeah, I mean, learning from your mistakes and having fun, that's the important thing. I don't mind losing as long as I had fun, as long as I gave as well as I got, as long as the fight was interesting. If it's a complete face roll on either side, I like winning as well, but if I completely decimate my opponent, unless I don't like the player, which, to be honest, I typically don't play against people I don't like, that's not fun either, because I want my opponent to have fun as well. I'm not going to pull my punches, and I'm not going to do things to give my opponent an advantage, especially if I've got that leg up. But, I also realize that, some days the dice gods decide to favor me, and, that the rest of the year, I'll go ahead and get trounced. That's just the way it works. But, yeah, and mixing your forces, and that's where you have to be careful, because I have seen, you know, depending upon the amount of points, people will just, you know, whatever the battle value is, you know, throw in like, you know, 3 awesomes and a longbow, something like that, just 3 tanks. That's not particularly fun, and if you know what you're going up against, you can certainly plan against it. Especially if they've got enough battle value to do that, you can certainly bring in quite a few more mobile mechs or something to counter them. And that's a lot of the challenge, and that's why I think the new campaign that Brian is running, I think he's got the next game scheduled. It's learning, and, you know, learning in a lot of ways trial by fire, because, you know, you're thrust into the cockpit, and most everyone has a pretty good idea of how the game is played, but you got to get out there and you know, move around. Sometimes you're going to take a punch in the face. You know, all plans, everyone's got a plan until, you know, somebody starts punching you in the face. And you can play, much like any game, you can play theory tech. You can, you know, run the calculations. You know, I enjoy the Death from Above wargaming channel, except for the theory tech that they keep, you know, that the head of the channel keeps doing, because you can talk about running all these simulations, 10,000 simulations, and this is what you come up with. Nobody's ever going to play 10,000 games, and you can say this is a statistic, or this is, you know, what should happen or is likely to happen, but in an actual game, it's never going to follow those numbers, all but guaranteed. You know, whether you believe in luck, karma, the dice gods, you know, the bell curve, whatever the case is, you know, you're gonna just roll the dice and hope for the best. You know, it's like give 1,000 monkeys, you know, 1,000 typewriters, and, you know, eventually in 1,000 years somebody will write Shakespeare. Sure, you're gonna, if you run enough simulations, you're going to get that unicorn of the game, you know, the perfect everything that happens. At the same time, you're also going to have the nothing goes right. Turn 1, you take that through armor critical, take a gyro hit, and down you go. I've also seen that happen. I've had that happen to me. And that's where you just got to roll with the punches as much as you can. You can never predict, you know, exactly what's going to happen. All you can do is plan for the, hope for the best, plan for the worst. I mean, nobody's going to predict that through armor critical, or that headshot that decapitates you. Whatever the case is, you know. There's not much more. I use embarrassing lightly because it's happened to me more than once. You know, that first cockpit hit. And you roll for consciousness. Roll 3 or better. Oh, look, snake eyes. And down he goes. Luckily, the last time that did happen to me, you know, for whatever reason, they didn't finish off the mech, probably because there were better targets, or more threats would probably be the better analysis. I was able to wake up and actually stand up. But, yeah. That's one of the great things about Battletech is, you know, the variety, you know. And I'm not even talking about like the variety of, say, different houses, because I play to the rule of cool, and salvage is the thing. So, you know, I don't care if this mech is primarily a Karita mech, or the, you know, this is the Free Worlds League, or this is a Lyran mech, you know, whatever the case is. If I want it in my force, it'll be in my force, because, you know, there's Battlefield salvage. You know, I might have bought it off the black market. I might have traded it, you know, there's no telling. But at least in Battletech, I've never been one to, like, really worry about canon, even when I'm painting up mechs in, you know, specific forces colors. I may or may not actually, you know, put a mech that would be with the Dragonis Combine, or with Wolf's Dragoons, or any of the other ones that I've done up. But And that is something that I am looking forward to trying, or to doing, when I do get back to Austin, is, you know, my mechs might not be on the cover of any magazines, and at least in this group, I doubt I'll win any painting competitions, but I do like to show off my painting skills, get some feedback, and I've got a lot of mechs to show off. I'm thinking about, you know, doing different lances, different formats, something to play around with. I've been watching different YouTube videos in general to get ideas on presentation, how I want to do things, and, you know, even just getting like a small Lazy Susan so I could put a mech on it, slowly turn it around. You know, I've got my tripod here, I've got some lights, so yeah, I can actually, you know, do some decent, hopefully some decent photo shoots, and, you know, keep getting better. That's, you know, I like to think that I've been improving on each of the videos that I've been putting out. I've caught myself not saying as much as I used to. I do pause quite a bit, mostly because I'm trying to catch my breath. Not to mention, I'm trying to think, you know, what I want to say, as opposed to just blurting something out, or, you know, filling that void with and this. So, like any other skill, it takes practice, and the more I do it, I think the better that I get. And, you know, here we are. But, you know, I'm almost back. You know, 1 mile up, 1 mile back. What are your favorite classes of mechs? What's your favorite battle mech? Do you have a class that you prefer to play over others? Do you have a specific theory for your building of a force? You know, go ahead and like and subscribe. Comment below. You know, let me know what you think. Eventually, I might get like my own. Might get a section on somebody's Discord, you know, for sharing your pictures, ideas, communication. But yeah, I like talking to people. Leave me a comment. Look forward to hearing from you, and I'll catch you on the next video.
Lift off of the second dropship. Orders. This is forward 3. The gantries are retracting at Gamma launch site. They're at full power and counting down to lift. Roger, control 3 hours. Starting salvage operation. This is forward 1. You're running out of time. Target gamma is nearly powered up. Take out the APU gantry.